Hello and welcome to the Reinvent Intelligence Report Thursday edition. This is the show where we tell you all about the highlights from the AWS reInvent 2024 keynotes. This one we're covering Swami Sivasubramaniam's talk. My name is Stephen Barr.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahul Subramaniam, and what a morning it's been. I don't think in all the years that I've attended reInvent, I've had such a flood of new product announcements all in one single keynote. But it's been amazing. What did you think about it, Steven?
Well, I want to quote a friend of mine on Twitter. I'll put the tweet on screen. It says, "This Gen AI focused keynote seems much more impressive than I expected. AWS has thrown a gauntlet. Swami is on fire today." And so I absolutely agree with that sentiment. And especially due to the fact it's really about making AI usable on the user side. How do you get data into it? And then on the consumer side, how do you use it in a way that's safe and reliable and predictable for enterprise?
Absolutely, and I think that's been the focus. It almost feels like the team has been working like crazy over the last year, trying to put together all of these amazing new features and services, and it's all culminated in this one keynote where they announced a whole lot of it. And I think this is despite the fact that they actually made some announcements around AI just yesterday. Yesterday's keynote with Matt was had a lot of Amazon Q in it. It had a bunch of the new models announced over there. So, despite all of that, today's keynote was insanely heavy with all the new announcements. So, why don't we dive right in? And for the audience, we struggled to organize all of this material because there was just so much of it. So, what we've done is we've kind of segmented it into three broad sections. We're going to talk about the announcements around Bedrock. Then we're going to talk about some of the announcements around SageMaker. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the announcements and key things to look at around Amazon Q.
Let's jump into it. Now, I think that's a great segue. Yesterday we learned about AWS Nova, or Amazon Nova, which is a new model family. I put this on screen. Amazon Nova. It has 3 flavors with one more on the way in increasing order of complexity and cost. And now today, the announcement was the Bedrock Model Marketplace. So what do we know so far about the Bedrock Model Marketplace?
Okay, so it's almost like the AWS EC2 marketplace, or just the AWS marketplace, where you can have all kinds of products. They might be attached to compute, or they might be hosted by AWS itself. But it makes it really easy for other third parties to offer their wares, in this case models, on the Bedrock platform. So far, AWS was the one that was hosting all these models. You had the Anthropic models, you had the Cohere models, you had Amazon's own models, and then of course the Llama models were also available. And now they've just added in the marketplace another 100 plus models. So that's been amazing. If someone else is developing any particular specialization in models, then it makes sense to take those and put them in the marketplace so that others can use it as well. And you could technically monetize the work that you put in to build these models. So it's a pretty interesting marketplace play.
Now, I like how they're saying that there's specialized models, right? They highlight a Korean language processing, a protein research one. So it's not just general LLMs. And it goes with the theme of saying, more is better. And it really reminds me of EC2, right? If they were all about one thing, it would be 100% Graviton. But it's not. It's Intel and AMD and 3 different generations of Graviton and a few esoteric ones in the mix as well.
In this particular case, I mean, you're, for example, looking for a specialized model for fraud detection in finance, and I think that was the case they brought up during the keynote. You can't have a standard LLM that does that, but somebody who actually has that problem and has tons of data or has access to tons of data could technically train a model that specializes in fraud detection in financial transactions, right? So those are the kinds of really neat, niche models that you're going to see, and you're going to see tons of them. Anyone who has tons of data can monetize that data now with a model that's trained on it, and you can now, make it available in the marketplace for someone else to leverage it or use it to do something interesting.
Well, and thinking about this plus the multi-agent orchestration that they're pushing, it kind of reminds me the most effective teams I know, there is not a ton of overlap in skills, right? You've got a marketing person and a tech person, a business person, a creative, and you have different skills. And the least functional teams I know, they're all from the exact same background, same school, same place. And so no one's bringing anything different to the table. And I think with models, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to have the fraud detection model, the creative model, the judge model, which makes sure you're not, saying something you shouldn't. Uh, all of those kind of things all mixed together. So they got the Bedrock marketplace on the screen. We're looking at the associated blog post, and there's a lot of things here. This is by Danilo Paccia, and he takes you through the process of signing up. Interestingly, just looking at the subscribe one, it looks like some of it can be on hosted infrastructure, so you want to pay attention to the cost there. Seeing this one, it says P4D.48x large. That $0 per hour is $0 an hour extra. You're not getting a free 48x large, so be careful with that. But yeah, that's a pretty neat one.
Yeah, it gives you access to a lot more. I would just say, with this huge influx of new models, the new challenge is going to be understanding which ones are really good at what. And so it's not a bad problem to have. We're going to start seeing a lot of new benchmarks for all these models come up. You're going to start seeing a lot of new use cases, and I think it'll open up a lot of very interesting applications that we're going to start seeing in the next few months on the platform.
And what I like about, and it mentions this in the blog post, is you can use the same APIs. So either invoke model if it's a one shot, or converse, and any of the converse supporting APIs. You can also use Bedrock agents and Bedrock knowledge bases. So from there, that's great. So if you hear of, oh, here's another model that works better for problem solving or reasoning or board game playing, we just switch your model ID and give it a shot.
Exactly. So very, very exciting news. Tons to research over here. I think it's going to keep all of us busy for weeks to come. Shall we switch over from models into knowledge bases? Tons of new announcements over there. So let's go over them very quickly.
This one is Bedrock Data Automation. Now, well, you had thought that there was going to be an anything database that was released, and I think knowledge bases is getting close to what you had predicted.
And information into the knowledge base, and knowledge base is getting more and more intelligent about first storing them in different places and then also leveraging all those insights in whatever analysis it does. We are starting to see, and again, I'm not restricting myself to this announcement because there's just so many related things that got announced over here. You've got everything from the storage that got enhanced with knowledge bases, where you've got S3, where you can have knowledge bases extract out all these very interesting images and charts and stuff like that and dump it into S3. You've got knowledge bases with GraphRag support now, which was the other announcement that just came up this morning. So yeah, it's starting to get very, very interesting. I think knowledge bases are going to become this new powerhouse of how you leverage it. You can just dump a lot of PDFs, a lot of presentations, all kinds of other documents in there, and then start extracting interesting insights out of it.
And the neat thing is, we've been building up these data stores, right? A lot of this could be, in SharePoint, and you'd be able to search it, but you couldn't ask it questions like, give me all of the graphs where they're going up and to the right in the third quarter, and this person worked on it, right? That's you can't do that with SharePoint, but you can take all that data that you've aggregated, dump it into knowledge bases, and with the multimodal, yeah, that's exciting.
It will be interesting to see in this multimodal mechanism how it is actually extracting the insights out of the images and what is it that it is saving in the vector database. So I don't know the answer to it, but it'll be interesting to do that research and share it with all of you.
Yeah, and some of it does appear to be very structured. They gave an example in one of the blog posts about getting fields from a birth certificate and kind of training it on that. So it felt almost like Textract in
Yeah,
this
I was about
case.
to say that.
So we'll have to see the details of how usable this will be. It'll have to prove itself out over time. On the face of it, it looks exciting to just be able to dump in PDFs, HTML, whatever you have.
100%. And then let's see, from knowledge bases, we move to all the storage stuff. So, of course, we did Aurora Postgres serverless. Vector store is now available, right? You've also got the graph rag that is now available with Neptune. And then what else? We have the S3 bucket that'll just hold content. So you got a lot of new enhancements in the way storage works with Bedrock now. So that's been pretty amazing. And then lastly, there are two very exciting new features that we want to talk about. You want to bring that up?
Okay, this is pretty cool. Intelligent prompt routing and prompt caching. So prompt routing, this is pretty cool. It's saying, okay, if you're using the Claude family, it will look at the question you're trying to ask and then analyze that question and can say, could Claude answer this? Or sorry, could Haiku answer this? Or do you need to go up to Sonnet? And so in my view, this is almost like model intelligent tiering.
It is model intelligent tiering, but kind of a different. I almost think of it like the elastic load balancer. To me, that is a closer analogy. You can decide which way to kind of, depending on your URLs, you can decide which way to route your traffic to which server behind the scenes. This is almost like that. So instead of URL-based routing, you're doing, based on the prompts, you're deciding which one is better suited to answer this in the most efficient, both in terms of latency and cost standpoint, and you route it to that.
No, there's clearly going to have to be some, to continue my analogy, monitoring cost, because you'll have to decide, analyze the prompt, and say, is this answerable by one or the other? And I've tried to think of questions which appear simple but are actually really complicated. Like, why are we here on Earth? Right? Like is that a simple question or a complicated question?
So I think my guess is that it's not going to do that right out of the gate, but it would probably train itself. So maybe the initial set of prompts that come in, it'll send them to both Haiku as well as Sonnet. It'll look at the results and then decide whether, if they're close enough, then Haiku probably can answer it going forward. If not, you would continue to send it to Sonnet. I think that's a more logical approach to take, rather than right from the get-go you've pre-decided which way certain prompts are going. I'm not sure how you would do that. The algorithm here is, if the answers between Haiku and Sonnet are relatively similar, then Haiku seems like the default to go with. If not, go with Sonnet.
Well, another neat one. So prompt routing and then prompt caching. Now, this is, you can cache frequently used prompts in context and prompts across multiple invocations. So you kind of cleared this up for me. It's not that you personally are asking the same question over and over again, but it's a large group of people who are using the same model. It can then cache its content from one to the other.
Yeah. So basically, it's got to be the same model behind it and the same router or mechanism that's basically bringing in all these users, queries, and then routing them to the corresponding model. That system has the cache built in. And it happens many times when you have multiple users who are, let's say, getting into a meeting and they're researching a topic just before they get into the meeting. Everyone is going to be asking the same question, so they are well prepared, right? So you want to make sure that all of those are serviced in the same way. Now, important note that the window for the time to live window for these caches is about 5 minutes. So your data is going to have recency, which is reasonable. And so there are some very niche cases where instead of literally bombing the LLM with the same query 100 or 200 or 300 times, you can cache it once and then that response comes back. Let's say, for example, a new bonus policy was announced in a company and everyone wanted to get more details about that, right? Whatever new announcement in the company, everyone in the company is trying to ask the same question. And so it might make sense to cache, do prompt caching in all of those scenarios.
Now, it's going to have some model to do question resolution, right? Because someone's going to say, when do I get my bonus? And the other one's going to say, when do we get our bonuses? And it will, in theory, it's going to have to resolve that to be the same question. And so there's going to be a little bit of overhead doing that as well. But I mean,
I think it's all you really need to do is figure out what the cosine distance or the vector distance is going to be. So if you vectorize the question, you look at what the cosine differences between the questions are, and then you can start clustering the questions into appropriate segments, and then all the questions within the segment will respond to the same cached or will respond with the cached value of the response.
Well, this hopefully can help save a lot. I like that of reducing both cost and latency, balance performance and cost efficiency. And it gives you some instructions here in this blog post. It shows you how there are new router metrics to see which model was selected by the prompt router, and it'll show you. Okay, this
This
question
is
is
prompt
complex.
router. We are doing prompt caching, which is
So prompt caching. Let's see if there's any examples of this in the blog post here. That's prompt routing.
yeah. I don't think they had examples in there, but you could just cache it. The TTL is about 5 minutes, and you can just turn it on quite easily.
Okay, well, this is exciting. I like how it's like I said, the default behavior is just point everything at Sonnet, but really you can use Haiku and use Sonnet when you have to, and that's a better model. But now you don't have to code up all of this decision logic on your own. You can use prompt routing. That's cool. Okay, well, let's go on to our next bucket, our next topic in the series, which is SageMaker. I was watching one of Corey Quinn's shorts today, and he goes, the whole SageMaker everything, SageMaker asterisk. So their SageMaker is becoming a very, very large umbrella, and the umbrella of the umbrella now is SageMaker Unified Studio. So what is SageMaker Unified Studio? What does it do?
Okay, so historically SageMaker had maybe 30 odd different services under it. There were multiple different things you could do, everything from data processing to data cleansing to data extraction to processing to cleansing to everything that you see in the typical training and inference pipeline. All of those were little components that you could basically piece together under the SageMaker umbrella. So SageMaker itself had tons of new stuff. That posed a big challenge in that you had to go to different places to do all these different independent things. You would have multitudes of notebooks in which you would be doing different kinds of activities, one for data cleansing, one for data preparation, one for training, for example. Now what they've done is they've basically taken all of these aspects and put them all under the SageMaker Unified Studio. I think that's what they call it. Yeah, it's SageMaker Unified Studio. And the nice thing about this is that all under one service, under one, almost like an IDE for this, you can actually manage to do all your stuff in one place without having to go to multiple consoles and do things all over the place across maybe 20 or 30 different services. So I love the fact that they have the Unified Studio. So that's been on the services side of things. On the hardware side of it, you've also got the hyperpods. So SageMaker hyperpods, that is, how do you manage the tens of thousands of processors that you need to actually run these massive training workloads? And there's many nuances to how they do it. What are the capabilities of all of it? But hyperpod is what all of this kind of falls under. There are many different enhancements to how you can schedule it, how you can calendar it. You don't have to use long Excel sheets anymore. All of that is now baked in to all the hyperpod setups. And then you have this thing called hyperpod recipes, which is standard best practice approaches that people have taken. They've got a certain schedule, a certain way of doing things. You might want to just use that as is, and if they offer that as a recipe, that's available for you to take. So there are multiple recipes available for how you schedule all this massive processing power. So all in all, tons of new announcements here.
I really like how AWS it is of this approach, right? They didn't think from the very beginning, how do we build the giant AI IDE to rule them all? They started with building blocks, and over time let the patterns emerge and see, okay, how do we what are the best paths amongst these group of things, and how do we make that simpler in a higher level product? Just like, well, for example, like Lightsail, right? It's kind of a smooth path between a couple of products. SageMaker Unified Studio, same thing, just a lot bigger.
Yeah, and SageMaker has come such a long way. I still remember, I think it was 2018 or 2019 at reInvent, where I did a talk with the AWS team that was just launching SageMaker Autopilot. And that feels like so long ago that was announced. And since then, I mean, we've come such a long way with what the SageMaker suite can now do. So really excited about everything that's come up now in SageMaker.
All right. Well, the final group of things, the final banner that we're going to talk about is Q. So I'll put the first one on Q Developer can now guide SageMaker Canvas users through ML development.
Yeah, everything seems overlapping and uh, very closely tied in with everything else. But here's how I'd like to look at it. So Q Developer is like one big cluster of announcements that happened. Yesterday in our show, we covered all the new capabilities of how Q Developer helps with Java migrations, with .NET migrations, and so on, moving out of Windows into Linux, all of those. So Q Developer has been great, and I think they had some very interesting stats of how Q Developer has been one of the leaders in the SWE benchmarks, which is awesome. And then, so there are tons of new announcements over there. Q Developer is also now connected into a bunch of other AWS services and can help you generate code for all of that stuff. Q Developer has always been really good at creating CloudFormation scripts, CDKs, and so on. So really, really useful for developers. The second aspect of everything around Q is around Q Business. Q Business is basically a mechanism of pulling in data from all the different data sources that you might have across your organization. It might be if you're using NetSuite, or you're using Zoho, or you're using Salesforce, or you're using Jira, or Zendesk, or any one of these operations, or any one of these tools, you can bring in all the data from all of that into this one unified platform. Q Business indexes it all for you, and you can create these little workflows, little apps. You can create these little tasks or Q tasks. You can create these little forms that will help you do your work better. So there's an entire ecosystem around Amazon Q, which is very, very exciting, particularly for business folks, and it'll make life really easy. You can create chatbots, all of that stuff out of all of this data that's now available to Q. Q does all the indexing and managing all of that for you. So that is the second area. The third area that I continue to be very excited about is Q for QuickSight. Q for QuickSight has existed for a while, and we've had a number of AWS folks. We've had Joe Skonakel on the show who's talked about Q and all the amazing capabilities, but now Q has come a long way. We had almost like the primitive version of an LLM back in the day when Q first came to QuickSight, but now you can actually ask it some really deep questions about all the data and all the roll-ups and OLAP cubes that you've created within the the QuickSight setup. So you can then query with either Athena, or you could query Redis, Redshift cluster for all the insights, and Q will take care of figuring out how to deal with all of that. It has all the indexes, it has all the data, it knows where to go for all the underlying insights. So
Yeah, it's like unsiloing all this data, right? Because every time you get a new SaaS product, you are committing to one silo, right? There's a bunch of Slack messages that are all in one place, and a bunch of Jira tickets, and a bunch of Trello stuff. And by being able to search across all of them, and then with QuickSight, maybe you can do things like, okay, which product team is the most productive, and how does that relate to their usage of, I don't know, Trello or ClickUp or something like that, uh, where you could really get this big picture view of how your enterprise works. Now, I could see the one downside, or downside, but caveat is that the Lambda policies to make all of this work the IAM policies to make all of this work is probably going to be tricky, because by default you have to make all these things talk to each other. And
yes, and they also claimed that this is going to be really easy, because really easy for the end user in terms of security policies. If a user does not have access to particular data in the native system, Q Business will not give them access to this data in Q itself. I can imagine the IAM nightmare that this is going to cause. I haven't tried it yet. I'm really hoping they build something intelligent that would just solve the problem automatically. So that's yet to be experimented. Like we said, a massive flood of announcements. We've not been able to get into all the details across these, but we will in the upcoming weeks.
definitely, well, we've got a keynote going on right now that we're going to cover in our next episode. That's Ruba Borno, and then Werner Vogels, who he's promised to give some details about DSQL. We're looking forward to that, and also enjoy the deep dives and the more philosophical part of his keynotes as well. So we have that tomorrow, and then we've got Lots of meetings. I think you've got some meetings. I've got some meetings, and also just some reunions with some old friends. So looking forward to that as well. I'm going to see Steph and Darko tomorrow. That's going to be a blast.
Yeah, and yesterday, by the way, was the FinOps reception. That was awesome. If you were there and we caught up, that's awesome. If you want to continue to, figure out a way for us to meet here at reInvent, please shoot us a note. You can connect to us on either LinkedIn or Twitter or any of the other channels that we have. Reach out to us, and we'd love to meet up with you before we head out. So yeah, till then,